Business Day today. April 2019 will see the effecting of sales tax. What will this do to Zambia's tax regime? And the festive season has so many temptations of spending way off your budget. But how can one rise above this? And prices of goods and services keep fluctuating so often. Now, get tips on how you can rise above this as an individual spender. And December is the last economic quarter. Have the economic projection growth been met in this year, and how will they affect 2019? These and more items on Business Day. This is Business Day, and my name is Judy Ngulube. To start off the program, we talk about the sales tax. The Zambian government announced in its 2019 budget on the 28th of September this year a withdrawal of its value-added tax. Plans in the 2019 budget include removing 16% VAT, first introduced in 1995. It will be superseded with the sales tax, only chargeable to the consumer at the end of the supply chain. Now, the earliest implementation date is going to be 1st April in 2019. The government has committed itself to paying many millions of VAT credit arrears to businesses, particularly the mining sector. I'm very glad in studio that I have a tax advisor in Mr. Patrick Mawire, who's going to help us talk about this. Just help us understand what sales tax is, the difference, and just know how 2019 will pan out when April reaches, to just see how the sales tax will actually operate. Thank you so much for coming to Business Day. How are you?
I'm okay, Judy, and how are you?
I'm very fine, thank you. Let's start with the most basic. What is sales tax?
Well, sales tax is one of those taxes that are a bit hard to define, chiefly because many jurisdictions operate it in a different way. But simply put, sales tax is a tax on the sale or provision of services. It's payable by the end consumer of the services or the goods.
Okay. When we talk about how it differs from the value-added tax, what is the difference between these two?
There are big differences between sales tax and value-added tax. The first one being sales tax is a tax on the ultimate sale, whereas value-added tax, as the name implies, is a tax on the value addition. So, for example, if I take copper as the most basic example, Zambia's biggest export. If I take copper, the mining company that supplies copper, for example, to a Zambian company that's making copper cables, they'll apply VAT. The manufacturer of copper cables will then claim a VAT deduction on the copper that they bought from the mining company and apply VAT to a constructor, for example, or a hardware store. So it's on the value add, whereas sales tax is on the ultimate consumer. So the person who uses an electrical wire in their house is the target of sales tax. That's the ultimate. And obviously that brings in a few complications because you need to make sure that within the supply chain, you don't have sales tax until the person who's building a house in Charleston or wherever with a copper cable can buy the copper cable and pay the sales tax.
The ultimate. When we talk about the sales tax, as opposed to VAT, for a country like Zambia, putting everything into consideration, middle income nation, where we're at in terms of development, trying to push in all this industrialization, sustainable development, when you look at these two forms of tax, why sales tax as opposed to VAT?
Okay, so I think that the minister's stated objective was to reduce refunds in the system. So sales tax generally doesn't have refund claims, and that also brings in a few complications between sales tax and VAT. So VAT is self-policing, meaning if I'm buying something from a supplier, I will want the VAT credit. So I'll make sure my records are clean, I'll make sure that everything is up to date, because ultimately I have to claim the VAT. Well, sales tax doesn't have that. So one of the challenges that you have with sales tax is compliance, because ultimately there is no self-policing mechanism that VAT has. The other challenge for sales tax to operate, remember the example I gave you of a copper cable. You need to make sure that ultimately only the person that's building a house pays the sales tax. So in the process, you need to give exemption certificates to make sure that the various suppliers in the chain don't incur sales tax. Whereas with VAT, you are only tracing invoices. So sales tax adds an extra layer of documentation that VAT doesn't have. But then, having said that, the big, I think, challenge with VAT was refunds, especially to the mines, chiefly because they export and the copper is zero rated, whereas their inputs are standard rated. So they are always in a refund position. Whether that is the best solution is a matter for debate, but I think that's the big difference, is that sales tax doesn't generate refunds because you're applying exemptions along the chain until the ultimate consumer pays for the products. Whereas VAT generates VAT along the chain. Each person that adds value is supposed to account for VAT. So I think the general difference is economically, because Zambia is a net consumer, you want to make sure that you don't have too many refunds. But as to whether the introduction of sales tax is a solution, that's a different issue.
It's a different issue altogether.
Yes.
Now, will sales tax really make a difference in Zambia's tax regime?
It will make a difference, but as to whether that's a long-term difference or not, that remains to be seen, because as I said, one of the key risks with sales tax is what we call cascading effect, which is, tax on tax. So for example, the example I gave you, if you don't apply a proper process of certificates and so on, you will find that sales tax accumulates. So what is the 5% rate at the beginning of the value chain could well end up being a 15-16% rate at the end of the value chain. Whereas for VAT, it's 16% currently, and that will be the VAT will end up at 16%, no more and no less.
So if you look at the pluses and minuses of sales tax, already one of the minuses I'm seeing is, this trail, the paperwork, what you have to do, isn't it?
Yes.
What is some of the advantages of this? And
If
there are more disadvantages, let us know as well, please.
Well, if you were to ask me, generally, I think there's a reason that, for example, I think if you look at the global position, there's only one jurisdiction that I know that has moved in the direction we are moving, which is from VAT to sales tax, which is Malaysia. Everybody else is moving in the opposite direction. I think in a span of 20 years or so, if you look at the global economy, we've moved from almost 50 jurisdictions with VAT to about 166. The Gulf nations currently are moving towards VAT. India has moved recently to VAT. So there's a reason that jurisdictions move to VAT. I think it has demonstrated advantages compared to sales tax. Having said that, I think the challenge is a cash flow challenge, and that's what the government is trying to stem. I think in the short term, that would be a solution, but you can't create cash out of a tax system. So in the short term, that could as well work in terms of reducing the cash outflow from the fiscus. But in the long term, the cash that's here will still be the cash that's here. You can't tax more than you are taxing. So I think the advantages, whatever they may be, in the long term will even out.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming through and just highlighting and enlightening us on sales tax, which, remember, will be effective April 2019, this coming year. Are there any questions that you're often asked when it comes to tax, especially when it comes to sales tax out there, in case we left out something?
Well, I think, the biggest worry among businesses is, the transition, especially with the period that's been given, which is effectively 3 months now. The legislation hasn't been announced. If you put yourself in the shoes of a business, for example, a retail store, they have ERPs, your SAP, your Pastel, whichever one it is, their retail systems, a lot of them are interlinked globally. For you to start changing, and also on the part of the government to draft this legislation within the period that they have will be very difficult.
So we're going to get some costs on.
Yes. So I think the 1st April deadline will be a challenge, the implementation date. No business will be ready in 3 months because of the many changes, especially big businesses have to make to their systems. But also, I'm not sure how government will be ready because of the many studies you need to do. You need to decide which goods are exempt, which ones are not, you know, what the rate should be to avoid a net increase from the 16% VAT we had. There's a lot of statistical data that you need. I'm not sure that's there at the moment.
Wow, that's a lot of work for business entities out there, isn't it?
It is.
All right. Once again, Mr. Mawire, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. I have spoken to my first guest today on Business Day. We were dwelling on the issue of sales tax, which are effective April this coming year, 2019. Join me on the other side as we continue with the program.
This festive season, we're making Santa say,
Ho, 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 ho. Give us somewhere.
go wild this festive season with ZNBC's Mbasela na Futi on all of our 6 channels and get rewarded by buying advertising spots on ZNBC. Such great benefits and discounts is what you get on every stipulated purchase on Mbasela na Futi. Call our sales and marketing office on 252-005 and we will come to where you are. It's Mbasela na Futi, exclusive to ZNBC. Promotion runs from 1st November 2018 to 28th February 2019. T's and C's apply. ZNBC, just for you.
All right, thank you so much for still watching Business Day. We now get into issues of a year concluding. Now, we all know that December is the last economic quarter, and of course, there are projections at the beginning of every year. But did these economic projection growths being met? Have they been met? Let us now chat with an economist, Mr. Franklin Membe, who's going to give us his insight on this one to just try and understand how, of course, 2018 is ending and what 2019 will be like, looking at all those economic indicators and what our growth rate has been like as a country. It's always a pleasure to have you on Business Day. How are you?
Very well, thank you, and thanks for inviting me.
Welcome. Let's start with your description of 2018 economic-wise.
I think that 2018 has been, somewhat, positive in the sense that the projections of 3.8% GDP growth have been, have been raised to about 4%. What is left is the interpretation of that 4% increase to trickle down, to the people. I think that's where we are having a challenge. But in as far as the growth is concerned, yes, there's been some positive growth.
So on paper, we have this growth.
Yes, exactly.
But in reality, it's kind of difficult to just
It's very,
see
very
it.
difficult because...
But why is that?
The reason is that, much of, government is the biggest spender of cash in the economy. And we have had a massive road construction, going on in the country, and 80% of the money that goes into the construction industry is actually paid to foreign companies. So basically, we are improving the economies of the foreigners, the countries from where these people come from, and Zambians, those who are managing to get 20% of the cake, that's the money that is remaining in the economy. So the trickling down effect is only 20%, and that's where the challenge is. I think we need to relook at how we can enhance the Zambian capacity in terms of construction, on how we can enhance the capacity of Zambians to be able to live up to the challenge of becoming contractors, so that we don't have to always lean on the foreign contractors. If that could happen, we should see a trickle-down effect onto the lowly of the nation.
Okay. When we break down further the projections of this year, firstly, as a whole, maybe we start as a whole, do you think they have been met? what we had in the 2018 budget, all those economic indicators and their growth from 2017, do you think they've been met?
Yes, I think that indicators have been met, except probably on the inflation. Yeah, inflation has kind of eluded us. We were projecting that inflation by the end of the year would come to about 5%, but right now we are talking about 7% inflation. And basically that has been caused by fuel increases. As you know, that there's been a fuel increase in the nation, and not only at global level. And the challenge we have is how to respond to this fuel increase, because the only choice that Zambia has is to pass it on to consumers. I think that if government could start looking at other ways of handling the pressure of course it's unavoidable, let me say. There's no other, nobody else can do anything about it. But I think that we need to look at other means of cushioning the impact of such increases. For example, I had a meeting with the transport minister just about 2 months ago, and I suggested to him that before you increase fares as a result of fuel increases, you start looking at introducing Marco Polo buses to transport people from downtown into the locations, and they get these minibuses to go back into the townships to be collecting people from where these Marco Polos will be dropping people. Now here we're talking about economies of scale. So even if in the world economy things are going bad, you can still bring down the cost of living of the people by applying economies of scale, because one bus, 65-seater, 65 people sitting, 30 people standing. Even in UK and US, they stand. I'm sure you have traveled, you have seen people standing. So one bus will carry 300 people. You'll see a situation where people are paying 3 kwacha from town to Chazanga, and once they get off at Chazanga, they'll find a minibus there waiting for them. And it's a win-win situation for both, Marco Polo bus owners, and also for minibuses, because minibuses, even if they charge 2 kwacha from the main road to drop you to, you know that there's people still walking 1 kilometer from their home to the bus station where they can get a bus, but that will end. So it will bring comfort to the people, and you can actually pay 5 kwacha to get to your doorstep.
Social and economic development, isn't it?
Yes.
So, but with all these comments that you've given, Mr. Membe, looking at how this year is ending, is the tighten your belt austerity measures going to pour out in 2019 on a large scale?
Well, the problem that we're having, like the previous speaker had said, is that the biggest foreign exchange earner or money earner in the country is copper. And I think that if we have to see 2019 change, where there's a trickle-down effect, where people can have better lives than 2018, is a situation where I think we need to relook at the agreements that have been signed with these mining conglomerates. I think that the agreements have loopholes which make it easy for mines to come up with very sad statements like they have been playing with us. They are now pulling the shots rather than us pulling, calling the shots. I think the idea is that we should get back to the drawing table and look at the agreements. And for example, this year, early this year, when I did a research on the copper prices, and I discovered that the London Metal Exchange in February was selling copper at $7,000. And I also discovered that the Chinese Metal Exchange was selling its copper at $8,000 per ton. And now the stories we're getting from the mining conglomerates in Zambia is that copper prices were going down, which means that they were actually lying to us. They were not telling us the truth. Now, what we need to do now, I think, to get back to the Kaunda regime days, where Kaunda demanded that copper must be sold at the London Metal Exchange. We shouldn't allow, instead of trying to overtax these mining conglomerates, I think we should ask them to sell their copper in a transparent manner. If we can allow them, if we can make it a must for them to sell at some metal exchange, either at a Chinese metal exchange or London Metal Exchange, where the price is actually determined by forces of supply and demand. It's an open market. It's very transparent, and all of us will know that this price is actually the obtaining price. But the situation now is that we are treating the copper mines as if they are selling chickens, where they choose who to sell to and at what price they sell. And I think that is a problem that we're having. If we can change
Would that go against the principles of liberal economy?
No. No. The thing is that, first of all, we have given them the right to come into our country because the copper is our economy. So, in other words, we have the right to call the shots. We need to sign an agreement. They're not just coming in because they are business people. We need to get away from the concept that government is not there into business. No, what government is not allowed to do is to sell chickens and fish, and they are not supposed to do that. But government should get involved in creating an enabling environment and in creating situation, in signing agreements with people that are coming to do business to the effect that whatever they do here should have a positive impact, on the nation rather than just on their profits. Because what is happening now is that they are making much more profit, and the tax that we're talking about, even if we increase the tax, they are paying tax on very little money that they declare to us. When in actual fact, when they sell, they are selling to the second party, who is also going to sell to the third party, and they are all the same. They are all the same team. So
you think the tax won't do it?
No, it won't help us. It won't help us at all. What will help us is to ensure that the price of copper is sold at well-determined prices, which are determined by forces of supply and demand. And we need to get to there. Then we can see a difference in the 2019.
Then it will be something else in 2019,
exactly.
Isn't it?
That's right.
Well, Mr. Membe, I would like to appreciate you coming through.
Thank you.
Definitely there's always something happening, and this, what we're talking about right now, the mining industry is a developing story. We'll definitely be talking about it over and over.
That's right, Judy.
I appreciate you coming through.
Thank you so much, Judy.
Okay.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you too.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right, so I have been talking to Mr. Franklin Membe. He's been commenting on Zambia's economy 2018 as a year, and of course how this will affect 2019, just commenting on different economic indicators and how we should pay attention to those that seem to have more potential than others and how we can maximize on them. On behalf of the entire production crew, this is all we had for you tonight. Join us next week, Thursday, 19:30, for more economic news. On behalf of the whole crew, I'm Judy Ngulube.